My name is Emily Parker, and I never imagined my life would reach a point where I would have to stand in the middle of two worlds, my marriage on one side and two men who cared about me deeply on the other. To anyone listening, this may sound dramatic, like something out of a movie. But when you live through it, when you feel your heart pounding in your chest, your knees shaking, and your soul questioning what's right and wrong, you realize life doesn't come with a script. I was married to David for 12 years. When we first met in college, he was charming, ambitious, and had that spark in his eyes that made me believe in happily ever afters. We got married right after graduation, moving into a small apartment and building a life together. Over the years, though, things changed. Responsibilities, bills, and routines replaced passion. His career in finance consumed him, and slowly, the man I once knew drifted further away. Conversations turned into arguments. Dinners became silent. And the laughter that once filled our home felt like a distant memory. It was during this time that I met two men who would unknowingly become pillars in my life. My brother Daniel, who had always been my protector since childhood, and my colleague Michael, a kind-hearted man who had worked with me for nearly 5 years. Both of them, in their own ways, stepped into my life at a moment when I felt invisible in my own marriage. Daniel was the kind of older brother every girl wished for. He was strong, protective, and yet gentle when it came to me. When I confided in him about my struggles, he never judged. He never told me to leave or to stay. Instead, he reminded me of my worth, that I deserved love, respect, and peace. He always said, "Emily, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself first." His words stayed with me more than I realized. Michael, on the other hand, entered my life through work. We had late nights finishing projects, endless meetings, and in between, small conversations that slowly built into trust. Unlike David, who seemed distant and distracted, Michael listened. He noticed when I was tired, when I was upset, when I wasn't myself. He never crossed any lines, but his kindness was a mirror that showed me what it felt like to be seen again. The breaking point in my marriage came one evening when David and I had an argument about something small, a dinner plan of all things. But beneath it lay years of frustration, resentment, and unspoken words. That night, David raised his voice in a way that frightened me, not because he threatened me physically, but because I realized how much love had turned into bitterness between us. I left the house in tears and drove to Daniel's place. Sitting at his kitchen table, I broke down completely. He just held my hand and said, "Emily, you can't keep living like this. You need to make a choice, not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself." The very next week, I decided to talk to David seriously. I told him we needed to either work on our marriage, truly work on it, or accept that maybe it was over. Instead of listening, he brushed me off, saying I was overreacting. That response cut me deeply because all I wanted was acknowledgement, some sign that he cared enough to try. The day everything came to a head was a Sunday afternoon. David had invited some of his colleagues over, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. He spoke to me with short, dismissive words, as if I was more of an assistant than a wife. When the guests left, I finally confronted him. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore. And that's when it happened. Daniel had come over because he knew I was struggling, and Michael had dropped by earlier with some work files. Somehow, both of them ended up at my house when I was standing in front of David, pouring out my heart. It wasn't planned. It wasn't staged. But there they were, two men standing beside me, each in their own way showing me support. David looked at them with disbelief. "So, this is what it's about? You've got other men now standing here, telling me how to treat my wife." My heart sank. I knew how it looked. But Daniel immediately stepped forward and said firmly, "No, David. I'm her brother. I've watched her cry herself to sleep more times than you know. I'm here because she deserves to be treated with love, and if you can't do that, then she needs to know she has people who will remind her of her worth." Michael, though quieter, added, "David, I don't want to come between you two, but I've seen how much pain Emily has been carrying. She's not asking for the world. She's asking to be heard, respected, and cared for. If you can't see that, then someone has to stand by her until she finds the strength to stand alone. The room went silent. I stood frozen, tears rolling down my cheeks, not because of fear, but because for the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. Two men, one bound to me by blood, the other by friendship, had chosen to stand with me when my husband could not. David's pride didn't allow him to soften in that moment. He looked at me, his eyes cold, and said, "If you're so unhappy, then maybe you should just go." Those words shattered the last piece of hope I had. But strangely, I also felt free. I realized in that moment that love cannot survive without respect, and marriage cannot thrive without effort. I moved out the following week, with Daniel helping me pack and Michael offering emotional support. It wasn't easy. 12 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight. I grieved. I questioned myself. I even blamed myself at times. But slowly I started to rebuild. I focused on my career, on my own happiness, on learning who I was outside of being someone's wife. Months later, David reached out, saying he regretted how things ended. But by then, I had grown stronger. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. I forgave him, but I didn't go back. As for Michael, over time, our friendship deepened. He never rushed me, never pressured me.
He simply remained by my side.
Eventually, I allowed myself to see him not just as a colleague, but as someone who truly cared. Whether or not that turned into love is a story still unfolding, but what mattered most was that I had rediscovered my worth. Looking back now, I realize the power of that one day when two men stood by me in front of my husband. Not because they wanted to replace him, but because they wanted to remind me that I was not alone, that I deserved better, and that strength sometimes comes from the people who choose to stand with you when your world feels like it's falling apart. Today, I share this story not out of bitterness, but out of gratitude. Because sometimes, life places people in your path not to fix you, but to remind you that you are strong enough to fix yourself. And for me, that reminder came when two men stood by me in front of my husband.